everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me for today's video. If you're new to the channel, my name's Emily and I'm creating videos around tarot and witchcraft, magic, spiritual kinds of content. So if you're interested in those sorts of things, then do stick around. If you like the sound of the video, click the thumbs up button and do subscribe if you would like to see more from me. I'd love to have you here. So we're in this weird stage between Christmas and New Year right now, and I'm kind of enjoying it, to be honest. I'm actually giving myself a chance to sort of like decompress. We've gone on lots of family walks and it's just been really nice. It's just been really lovely to spend some time with the kids and play with lots of toys with them and read a little bit more and relax a little bit more and reflect upon the year and the goals that I set for last year and the things that I wanted to learn about and achieve and grow into and develop into, and considering where I want to head in 2021 and thinking about, you know, a depth year and all sorts of things like that. And I do want to make another video along those sorts of lines as well at some point, so I will be doing that because I want to share how I've been kind of recording my daily tarot practice over the last year and what I'm planning to do next year as well. I still think I have some questions for myself, so I will be filming that at some point soon, hopefully not too far into the new year. In today's video though, I wanted to do a VR to the lovely Candy at Candy Soul and Soil. Candy has been making some really inspiring, amazing videos this year, and I've just been tuned in and on the edge of my seat and, you know, goosebumps, tears, all of it. So I've just been so enjoying Candy's channel, and I think her reflections have been really powerful and really moving. So when I saw this tag that she created, I was so inspired to do a VR, and also I just found it so fun. It was such a interesting way to sort of look at the tarot, and it also gives us a chance to look at those decks that we haven't used so much or that we don't shout about because they're not like the latest releases, or they're not indie decks, or they're not whatever, they're not our favorite decks. Then either we don't work with them that much, or we just never really talk about them that much. And I think I've got quite a few of those sorts of decks in my collection, and so the idea that I could get to kind of show some of them off a little bit and give them a little bit of love is quite nice. So I just think it's a brilliant tag, and Candy's video was so entertaining and fun, and I just want to say thank you to Candy for the tag because it's fantastic. And I'm going to get right on into it and pick my tarot decks that go with each prompt. I haven't actually been through and decided. I've sort of pondered on it a little bit, but I have no answers, so we'll see how it goes. So the first prompt is the Cheapskate Date. Who did you date because they were cheap as chips, and what was the outcome? Okay, so for this one, I actually do have two, so I'm going to be annoying and cheat. But one of them is one that I picked up just recently because I saw Simon at the Hermit's Cave talk about it. I'm in the UK and we have a shop called The Works, and they do these sales. They sometimes have tarot decks and such, and I saw this deck on Simon's channel, and I happened to be in town returning a jumper for my hubby because it didn't fit him and exchanging it for something else. So I popped in to The Works. So this is the cheapest deck I think I've ever bought. This was £6 and it's the Magick of Tarot by Liz Dean, and it is a pip deck. But the reason I actually got it was not just because it was really cheap, but that I really did like the majors, the illustrated majors. I really liked them, but you can see the minors are kind of a bit plain really. Let's find some more majors. But Simon did a full walkthrough of this, and I actually was quite drawn to some of the illustrations, and I thought, well, it's only £6, I'm gonna give it a go. But I haven't actually worked with this yet because that was literally just after Christmas that I picked this up. So I have yet to work with this, so I can't really say what the outcome is, but I have another deck that I can. So the main deck that I'm gonna say for this prompt is the Dreaming Way Tarot. I picked this deck up this year actually. I really enjoyed the artwork. But when I first started to actually try to work with it, I was really put off by the backs. And I can't remember what that thing is called, what the phobia is called, but the phobia of like holes Does anyone know it's something beginning with T, but it like, ugh, you know, the like the lotus holes, and like if you look online and like, oh, I just get really like, oh, itchy at it, and it kind of reminded me of it, and I was like, I don't like the backs, and they just feel really like not in alignment with the deck at all. I really do like the artwork though in this deck, and I have been using this for the last couple of months actually. I have really enjoyed using it. The readings have been really interesting because there have been several cards that have just absolutely stalked me from this deck, and they've been spot on as well. The readings have been really interesting for me daily, and it's been quite gentle. It's not been like harsh, but it has sort of brought things out that, you know, I needed to look at and such. So I really enjoyed using this deck so far, and I get this wintry vibe from it. You know, there are certain cards in here that just feel really wintry. I really like the facial expressions that the characters have as well. I don't have the Anna K tarot, but I sort of feel like some of the expressions are kind of similar, because obviously in the Anna K, the expressions of the folks portrayed within those cards are very expressive and emotive, and you can really sort of feel what they're feeling and sensing through their expressions, and I think that's really interesting. I think you get a similar kind of thing from this deck. I've really been enjoying this actually, and I did edge it as well. I edged it when I first got it, and I edged it quite badly. It's quite messy around the edges, but I quite like that as well. So it kind of looks kind of aged and old because it's got this sort of like messy gilded edge. Really, that's just because I was, you know, not careful. So that's my fault, but I quite like it. So this is one of my favorite cards. This is Queen of Swords. She's very ice queeny. It's a lovely deck. I really like this. So cheapskate deck really. I'm not sure how much this was. I think when I got it, it was maybe 11 or 12 pounds, maybe something like that. So yeah, this is definitely a deck that I picked up because it was inexpensive and I really liked the art, and it was not a hit at first, but I think it's definitely one that I've enjoyed using recently. The next prompt is the slow burner date, the one you weren't sure about on first meeting, but over time you suspect it's turning to love. My hubby just brought me wine, isn't he lovely? It is the evening, by the way, I'm not just day drinking. Not that there's anything wrong with day drinking, God, that's good. Oh, just digging a hole right there. So for me, this one's got to be the Wildwood. I first saw this a few years ago and I really liked a couple of the cards, but then some of them I just didn't gel with, like the images, and I heard people talking about it and I thought, yeah, that's just not for me. And I had the Druidcraft and I really liked that deck, and I thought, you know, that's kind of similar, I don't need this. And I just found myself this year really needing this deck. And I don't know what it was. I think I was sort of deepening my interest in druidry and connecting more to the area in which I live, and I just found that I just had to have it. And when I got it, it was just like love. I mean, I can't, yeah. This deck, apart from the box, which is just one of these really awkward like double box situations, and I have the book on my shelf, so when I've got the deck inside the box, the cards just fly everywhere, which is really annoying. I have had this deck out for quite a lot of the year since I picked this deck up. I've only put it away recently because I was working with some more wintry sort of decks. I believe actually, you know, look at that. That's very wintry, so I don't know what I'm talking about really. I put it away, I was working with some other decks, I've only got so much space out, so I actually want to get it out again now though. There we go, I've got the cards now. There are a lot of animals in this deck, and some of the meanings of some of the cards are slightly different, but all in all, it does still mostly adhere to the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith system. There are some changes. They changed the names of the suits, so these are bows, which are obviously wands. You've got the green man here, which is the Emperor. But there's just something about this deck, you know. Will Worthington illustrated the deck. It's by Mark Ryan and John Matthews. You know, I think one of the reasons as well that I didn't think this deck was for me was because I was so attracted to the greenwood and I couldn't get my hands on that, and I'm really waiting like excitedly for the re-release because I believe they are re-releasing it. I'm very excited for that. But I think, you know, both. There's room in my collection for both, but this was a slow burner for me because it took me a while to get to that that point where I was like, I need this deck. And when I had it, I worked with it a lot over the summer, and I paired it a lot with the Tree Whisper Oracle by Mags at the Woodland Hag, which I mentioned in my favourites of the year because it is definitely my favourite oracle, and they paired so beautifully together. They really, really did. And the messages were quite deep and heartening, and just I felt like a soul connection with this deck and with the Tree Whisper deck. So this is definitely a slow burner for me in terms of like coming to it and learning to love it, but it's love. It's true love, definitely, for sure. This is one of my favourite decks, and I'm excited to work with it again. I want to work with it now, so I think I'll have to bring this one back out again and put it on my altar space. Okay, so the blind date. Because we are impulsive humans and sometimes we just rush in, who did you date without looking or thinking? I think there are a few to go into this. For me, this one, it's the Tarot of the She. This one just captivated me, really. I have a book by Emily Carding. This is Fairy Craft, Weaving Connections with the Enchanted Realm. I dipped in and out of this a year and a half ago or so. I really enjoyed what I did read, and I saw that there was a deck, and then some people started to talk about it, and I kind of loosely watched the videos. But I think that even when I was watching the videos, I was pottering, you know, I was like doing cleaning or like some washing up or something. So I didn't really even take that much time to look at the cards. And I think when I first actually saw the illustrations, I thought that's a bit different. Like I know this might not be like a popular opinion, but I do quite like the beautiful fairy look, you know, and I wasn't so like enamored with the, you know, perhaps more raw and natural kind of elemental look of the fae that this deck had. But then I just had to have it. I can't really, there wasn't like a moment where I was like, oh, actually I do love the art. I didn't even think. I just looked for it on Amazon and I just got it, and I think I was probably under some kind of spell. I did love this deck and I fell hard for it. I used this deck a lot in the spring, summer of this year. I remember working with other fairy decks at the same time, like the Hidden Realms by Julia Jeffries, is it, and Barbara Moore. I worked with that and I really loved the art in that as well, but it's very, very different, and I really appreciated that. And you know, there's something so, I don't know how to describe it, there's something so elemental about this, that it is so raw. It almost feels like these are what the spirits would look like to the naked eye if we could see them. And the colours are fantastic, and the emotions and the vibrancy of this deck. I mean, you can feel the power of this deck through the images. There is so much in this deck, and I found myself actually reading with this deck really intuitively, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really loved it, like why it speaks so much to me and so much to others. So many people love this deck, and I understand why. It speaks and it dances and it tells stories. This is something that Candy talks about so much. This deck tells stories, it weaves stories, and it's just been a very powerful reader, because beyond the original meaning of whatever card it was that I would pull, there would be more, so much more to it, because of the way that the card was depicted. You know, there'd be so much more in it, and it's such a deep, deep, powerful deck to work with. I definitely want to work with this so much more going forward. I worked with it a lot when I first got it, and in spring and summer of this year. I haven't really used it in the autumn winter of this year, so I'm really excited to pick this up and start using it again. I think there's something so very visceral and real and raw about this deck. It's very magical. I think that's why this one I just didn't really look. I just jumped straight in, head first in, and I don't regret it. It's a fantastic, fantastic deck. I'm so, so pleased to have it in my collection. It's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful deck. I love it. So the next prompt is the rebound date, the one you keep going to break up with but keep getting pulled back together. Right. I think for this one, it's got to be the Ethereal Visions. I haven't thought about rehoming this. I haven't thought about getting rid of it because I think it's so beautiful. But I haven't worked with it nearly as much as I thought I would. When I first got it, I worked with it a little bit, but the bond just didn't seem to be so strong, so I kind of left it for a while, and then I think I saw someone working with it and then picked it up again and enjoyed it again for a little bit. I just love these backs. And again, the same thing happened. I couldn't let it go. It's so incredibly beautiful. I love the art. I love this like gilding that you have throughout, this sort of gold throughout. I really enjoy this deck, but for some reason there isn't a strong connection between me and this deck that there is with other decks, and I don't think that's any fault of the artist and the creator Matt Hughes. I think this is such a beautiful deck. In fact, I would, you know, be inclined to say this is one of the most beautiful decks that I have ever seen. But yeah, there is just something that keeps it from being like one of my favorites. The readings I get from it are very good, you know, I can't fault that. I don't know what it is, and that's kind of annoying, isn't it? That's annoying me. That is frustrating to me actually, because my answer is kind of not giving me the answer that I want, but I don't know why, because I'm looking at this, falling in love with it again, and I don't know why I don't work with it more. I don't know why. I actually think it'd be fun to rotate some decks in the next year. The way I tend to work with decks is I just tend to feel into what I need to use that day, and I tend to use several decks over a period of a few months, and then maybe I'll shift one out and one back in, but it's all really intuitive. I just go with my gut. But like, look how beautiful that is. Look how beautiful that is. I really want to work with this now. See, I could never get rid of it. Not that I was even contemplating it, but this is really special deck. And I do wish that I had more of a connection to it. I think if I work with it more in the next month or so, maybe I will get a stronger bond with it. I think that's what it is. Maybe I've just not given it enough of a chance. So I'm going to give this one a little bit more of a chance. I'm definitely not going to rehome it. I love it. I really do. But I want there to be a stronger bond. So I'm going to give this one another go. Prompt number 5 is the surprise love affair date. The one you thought would be just okay, but from first meeting it was love at first sight that took you by surprise. I don't know, this is such a hard one. This prompt is a really hard one. I have several decks that I think would fit into this, so I'm going to mention all of them and maybe show you a couple. The first one really that I picked up was the Mermaid Tarot by Lisa Robertson. I picked this up because I was working with sort of mermaid energy. I was working with mermaid oracles and the Dame Darcy's Mermaid Tarot. I was working with some sort of water magic, and I thought that this would be a really nice deck to have, and it did surprise me a lot actually, how easy it was to work with this deck and how enjoyable. Some people have said that this is quite fairy tale like, that it's kind of Disney-ish. I think some people don't appreciate it because of that. I think, yeah, it kind of is a little bit more sort of in that art style, but I also think it's got more shadowy aspects to it as well, as you can see. I love the backs. They were beautiful. I think part of the reason that I kept this out for so long was the backs just looked stunning, and I just kept reaching for it every day. I just kept reaching for it. So I don't think I expected this to be such a great deck in my collection for me when I first got it, because I think I thought it's kind of just one of those sort of novelty decks that would be nice to have to work with a little bit here and there, but it's more than that. It definitely is more than that. This card came up so much for me when I was working with it. It is so much more than that. It really is, and it's a good guidebook as well. I think this is a great tarot deck actually. Some other decks that I consider in this area would probably be like the Everyday Witch. I kind of got that because I felt like my collection was sort of missing something without it, but for a long time I kind of resisted. I didn't think I really needed it or wanted it, but I kept seeing it and then I kept just falling in love with the imagery. So that was another one. Yeah, I really have enjoyed having it. And the Green Witch too. I know that they're different decks, and I know they have different energy to them as well, but they are similar. And for a while I was like, well, if I get one of them I don't need the other, but that's so wrong. But to me those are similar in that way, that I think they're just going to be sort of okay, but they end up being like real favourites in my collection. And oftentimes I think it's going to be the indie decks that are always my favourites. Of course I do love to talk about indie decks, and oftentimes they are favourites, but there are so many favourite decks that are mass market as well that maybe get talked about a lot, so I resisted talking about them. Like the Everyday Witch is talked about so much, so I don't really talk about it, but it is definitely in that category. Like, it's one that it has been really special, and I kind of just thought it would be okay, but it has been really, really special. And same with this. Okay, number 6 is the not my type date. The one you went on thinking it wasn't really your cup of tea, but what the hell, what happened? I know which deck this is. For me, this one is the Deviant Moon, and for so long I thought I really didn't like this deck at all. I found the art confronting and not frightening, I guess, but just kind of unpleasant to look at. But I studied art and my mum's an art teacher, and you know, I remember being fascinated by some art pieces and some artists during my studies, and study artists who made really difficult work to look at. So for instance, the artist Otto Dix, he created a lot of quite difficult to look at paintings, and some of the imagery is quite sort of grotesque in nature, but it's so fascinating and interesting and really quite beautiful. And I actually often think of that. It's like H.R. Geiger as well, his artwork. A lot of it is obviously very sexually explicit and graphic, and some of it's unpleasant to look at, but it makes it incredibly beautiful as well. And I think that that's what I kind of thought of with this deck. I didn't think I wanted it because I thought it was a bit too shadowy, but with a lot of these I didn't really know what it was. I just knew I needed it, and when I got it, it was like medicine. Working with this deck for shadow readings, but also for other everyday readings, was a powerful experience, because I found that, and it's so hard to even describe this, but I found that it was actually quite comforting and healing, because it was almost like there was space in the cards to be held through trauma and pain, and because of the nature of some of the images being sort of more difficult and challenging to look at, I felt like there was a generosity of spirit with this deck. It held space for me, and I felt like it held space for me to feel all these emotions and to allow, you know, pain of the past to come up and stuff, but also allow me to sit with discomfort and allow me to look at the things that aren't so, you know, rosy about myself, you know, and it helped me to hold space for that and to not feel like a horrible human being if I have emotions that are unpleasant to sit with. Like anger, for instance, is an emotion that when expressed, it's often thought of as like a negative emotion, something you shouldn't be expressing. Especially, I think, as a woman, there's this sort of pressure to be compliant, to be polite, to be nice, to be friendly, to be smiley, to be happy, to be sexy, to be beautiful all the time, and to not feel those things. But actually, anger and self-expression of that in a way that is healthy, in a way that is not hurtful to others or to yourself, you know, is actually really, really healthy. And so it's finding that outlet and a way to kind of express it. But I felt like this deck was just holding space for that. I didn't feel judged by this deck. I think that's what it is. It gave me the grace and the space to be sitting in those most unpleasant of emotions and to be okay with that. And I think that's why it's such a great deck for shadow work. I don't think it's because it's got, you know, difficult imagery. I just think it has a humility to it and a generosity of spirit. I think that's where I'm going with it. And I think it's wonderful. I think this deck is absolutely wonderful, and I'm so glad I got it. I think Patrick Valenza's work is beautiful, and I really want the big book as well. That is on my list. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that book from what I understand from seeing other people talk about the book and some of the content in it. I just think this deck is fantastic, and when I work with it, the readings I've had have been so eye-opening and so healing and so soothing, and I really think it's held space for me in that way. So I absolutely adore this deck, and I didn't know that I would feel like that about this deck before I got it. It's been an incredible journey with this deck. I love it. I love it. The next prompt is the I may have to delete your number date. The one that really didn't work, but you still haven't broken up with yet. And what's stopping you? I would never imagine that I would talk about this deck ever, because I've used it once and I don't particularly like it. And that is The Mystic Dreamer by Heidi Darras, and the guidebook is by Barbara Moore. I saw the imagery online and I thought that I would like it, and I wish I'd opted for something else, because when I got it I was just so underwhelmed by it in all honesty. It's not that I don't like the imagery, it's probably something to do with the yellow borders that I don't enjoy. I feel like you don't really need borders with a deck that's this small because it's sort of traditional, you know, tarot size, but you can't get into the artwork enough. And all of the figures in this deck are young, beautiful, like, or the idea of beauty that you would imagine. And I believe it's photo manipulation, collage, and it just didn't have what I thought it had. I picked this up a couple of years ago and I already had the Tarot de la Nuit, which I still do enjoy, but it's a bit, you know, body beautiful, but I do love the colours in it. But I thought that this would be kind of similar, and it's just really not. It was a bit of a disappointment for me. I'm sure like some people would love this deck, it's just not me. You know, I saw this kind of thing online, I think, and I thought, oh, it looks so enchanted and beautiful, but in the flesh it's just not done anything for me whatsoever. So I think I pulled one card from it and I never used it again. I don't want to keep this deck. I do want to remove it from my collection. I haven't done so yet because I haven't really had an opportunity to. I mentioned it, I think, on a Facebook group, but it didn't really go anywhere. I don't think anyone's interested in it. So I haven't. I'd be very happy to do a deck swap with anyone though, if they are interested in this deck, because this one is not for me. But yeah, just one of those errors in judgment, I guess. This is just not for me at all. That's the one, really, that I just want to break up with. I will break up with this deck. It's just not for me, unfortunately. Okay, so this next prompt is the Forever Love, True Love. Okay, this one might be on your favourites list too, but I'm curious and couldn't resist. Okay, so I have a number of favourite decks, so this is very hard. Okay, I've mentioned this one on my channel a couple of times. This is the Celtic Wisdom Tarot. I got this last year, I believe, and I picked this up from eBay. It took a while to find it at a reasonable price because it is out of print. At first, I found the book and I thought that it included the deck, so I picked the book up and then I realised it was just the book, but then found the full thing. So now I have two books because the book comes in it. I've read the book, it's very good, and I have the deck. This lives on my altar space all the time. This just feels like a soul deck for me, really. I don't really say that I've got a soul deck, but I think if I had to be asked if there was a soul deck, it would probably be this deck. This wasn't included in my favourites of the year because I didn't get it this year, it wasn't from this year, and to be honest, I've used other decks more. I don't tend to use it all that often, but there is such a deep connection to this deck when I do use it, and it's much more of a spiritual kind of experience rather than just a daily draw kind of thing. So I might use this for bigger spreads, or I might use it when sort of in communion. I might use this more for spiritual sort of work. It has a depiction of the Morrigan in it, which is one of the reasons why I love this deck. It's got lots of Celtic lore in it, so it's a really nice deck to kind of learn from. And the images are just beautiful. I just love the images in this deck as well. This deck is by Caitlin Matthews and the illustrations are by Olivia Rayner. I really do love these illustrations. There's something really powerful about them. They do speak to my soul. So I think this has got to be up there with the favourites. I couldn't say it's 100% my favourites, but it's probably one of the closest. If I was bringing one from my yearly favourites, it would probably be the Bonestone and Earthflesh because that's got a similar pull for me. It's one I use more frequently than this one. They're both spectacular decks. This one has a slightly different system, and I think that might be one of the reasons why I don't use it so frequently, because with the decks that I have that have slightly different systems, I tend to not use them as frequently. I think I sort of got myself into this little bind this year, and I will mention it when I do my kind of review of the way that I was recording my daily draws, etc. But I sort of got myself into this bind where it had to be the RWS, and I wasn't so thrilled about that, but now I'm through that, so I can kind of just do my own thing. But I'll explain more about that in that video. I am thrilled with this deck. I love it. It is true love for me and this deck. The stormy on-off date, the one you can't stay away from, equal parts passion, lust and fighting. The one you have to have a break from, but can't stay away from either. For me, this is probably the closest. This is the Dreams of Gaia Tarot. This is such a beautiful deck, but I have to have breaks from it because it is so intense. and overwhelming, and the book is fantastic. I mean, there's so much juicy information in this book, but you could dive into one card so deeply, and the art is spectacular. It's just so intense. It is so intense, and such beautiful artwork. Honestly, I love this deck, but we have had some moments where I've just had to put it down and put it away because I do find it incredibly intense. It has a slightly different system to it than the RWS, which is probably another reason why I find it difficult to work with. I always have to think a little bit about, you know, the numbers, the Roman numerals. I always have to use my brain a little bit more, obviously, and for ease of use, it's not the simplest in that way because I know the elemental signs, but again, it's not so easy as just seeing wands or fire or water or cups, you know. Obviously, this is water energy, but, you know, it takes me a second to look at the picture and then look at the elemental sign and go, okay, yeah, that's water. Whereas it's just instant when you've got cups or water written on it. I know that sounds so basic and stupid, but literally when you're doing a reading, I think, yeah, that matters to me. And I did just find it, I'm almost feeling like headachy actually, just being near this deck, and I don't want to feel that way about it because I really do love it. I love the art, and the depth of the book is so powerful, and I think that this year this is a deck that will be really fun to explore. Now I don't have to, now that I'm out of that whole bind I talked about, which I'll explain. Basically, it's because I was recording in a particular way and I had little symbols for all of the cards, and if I deviated away and I used a different deck for my daily draw, it wouldn't fit into those symbols and that system. And then I was like, oh well, that's a day without that reading, and it kind of, I got myself into that bind without really even anticipating that I would. It's something that I know now, and it's something that I'm not going to be doing next year, so I'm gonna be able to just work freely and work more intuitively with my decks, which is something that I really have been craving for a while. This is a beautiful deck, but I do feel rather bowled over by its strength. It is incredibly powerful, an incredibly intense deck, beautiful deck, and one that I do want to get to know more. But yeah, we've had rather a up and down kind of affair, I'd say. The final prompt is the Friends with Benefits date. Who can you run to without commitment whenever you just have a need for them? The one who always just slots right back in like you've never been apart. I think for me, it's the Crow Tarot. This is a deck I've had for a really long time, and this is a deck that I haven't worked with in a while, but when I do, it feels very familiar and feels very, you know, in alignment and what I need in that moment. I work a lot with crow energy. There's a lot of crows where I live, and also because I work with the Morrigan, crow energy is a really big part of my practice, and I tend to work with the Murder of Crows more than I work with this deck actually. Even in the time that I think I've had the two decks, I've had the Murder of Crows for less time, and I think I've worked with it more than this deck. It might be because of the artwork, because even though I think the artwork is spectacular and splendid and beautiful, it's quite busy. That might be one of the reasons why, but it is a stunning deck, and I really want to work with this deck more now. It's just so many decks, not enough time, and then you want more decks. Isn't that just the way? Like, you just want more and more decks, like, because there are just more and more beautiful pieces of art. The artwork is so appealing and beautiful and stunning, and I think this is one of those decks, you know. This has really made me think about some decks that I want to work with. Yeah, I really feel the bond to this deck. This is actually making me feel rather emotional, like working with this deck again. This definitely fits into this prompt so beautifully. There have also been some other decks that I've thought, oh, that will fit into that, and I've not actually mentioned them here. And so I think I'd like to find a way to talk about those decks too, because they have their place in the collection, and in, you know, in my life they have that place too. So I'm actually mulling over some thoughts for a hashtag myself. When that will come, I do not know, but I will think about it and I will let you know as and when, obviously. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much, so much to Candy at Candy Soul and Soil. It has been so much fun. This is a really fun tag and a really interesting way to kind of look at the tarot. This is dating the tarot. Yeah, I think in a way that's what we're all doing all the time. We're sort of picking up a deck and, you know, trying it on and then moving on or sticking with it, and we create these little bonds and these relationships with these different decks, and it's so interesting to kind of look at it from the context of like an actual relationship or a romance, because some of them can feel rather like whirlwindy like romances. It's so interesting and so fun. So I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Candy. I really hope that you've enjoyed seeing some of these decks as well. Do let me know what decks you would put into each of the prompts, or if you've done a VR, then do let me know below, because I would love to see more of these. If you did enjoy the video, do click the thumbs up for me, and if you want to see more and you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe. It will be absolutely lovely to see you here again. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope that you are staying safe and well and enjoying this little in-between period, or when you watch this it might be after the in-between period, I'm not sure, but I hope that you are staying well and having a good, safe holiday, and looking forward to 2021. I hope you have a wonderful new year and stay well and safe, and I will see you again in another video soon. Bye. Mwah.